I was 29 and driving through the back roads of rural Kansas on my way to visit my brother. It was well past midnight, the kind of night where the sky feels too big and the road feels too empty. I had been behind the wheel for almost 9 hours straight. My eyes were burning, my back ached, and the only thing keeping me awake was the weak coffee I had bought 3 hours earlier. I saw the sign for a 2-4-hour diner called Midnight Plate glowing faintly off the highway. The parking lot was small and mostly empty, just one other car parked crooked near the side door. I pulled in, killed the engine, and stepped out. The night air was cool and carried the smell of fried food, old grease and rain that had fallen earlier. Gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked toward the glass door. Inside, the diner was brightly lit with harsh fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. There were red vinyl booths, a long counter with spinning stools, and the faint smell of coffee mixed with pancake syrup. Only 2 other people were there, a tired-looking waitress in her 50s wiping the counter slowly, and a single customer sitting in the corner booth with his back to me. I sat at the counter and ordered coffee and a burger. The waitress nodded without much enthusiasm and disappeared into the kitchen. While I waited, I noticed the other customer. He was an older man, maybe late 60s, wearing a faded flannel shirt. He hadn't moved since I walked in. His plate was still full, like he hadn't touched his food. The waitress brought my coffee. Her hands were shaking slightly as she set it down. She leaned in a little and said very quietly, "You might want to eat fast and leave." I asked why. She just shook her head and went back to the kitchen. I started eating. The burger was decent, but the silence in the diner felt heavier than it should. The only sounds were the clock ticking on the wall and the occasional clink of silverware from the corner booth. Then I heard the man in the booth speak for the first time. His voice was low and calm. He said, "You're the last one tonight." I froze with the burger halfway to my mouth. I turned slightly. He was still facing away from me. The waitress came out again, her face pale. She whispered, "Don't answer him. Just finish and go." I ate faster. The man in the booth spoke again, louder this time. "I've been waiting for the last customer. It's always better when there's only one left." The lights above the counter flickered once. The clock on the wall stopped ticking. The waitress dropped a plate in the kitchen with a loud crash. I stood up, left some cash on the counter, and headed for the door without finishing my food. As I pushed the glass door open, the man in the booth finally turned his head. His face was completely ordinary, gray hair, tired eyes, but when he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. He said softly, "Drive safe. I'll see you at the next stop." I practically ran to my car. I locked the doors, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot as fast as I could. In the rearview mirror, I saw the waitress standing at the window watching me leave. She looked relieved. I drove for another hour without stopping. The highway was empty. No other cars, no lights, just me in the darkness. But here's what still haunts me. 2 weeks later, I was on another long drive through a different state. Around 2 a.m., I saw another 2-4-hour diner off the road. Same faded sign style, same lonely feeling. I was exhausted again, so I pulled in. The parking lot had only one other car. When I walked inside, the waitress looked up. Her face went pale the moment she saw me. She whispered the exact same words as before. "You might want to eat fast and leave." In the corner booth sat the same older man in the faded flannel shirt. His plate was full. He hadn't touched his food. He turned his head slowly and smiled that same empty smile. "Welcome back," he said quietly. "You're the last customer again tonight." I didn't sit down. I turned around and walked straight out. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The man was standing at the diner window now, watching me leave. He raised one hand in a slow wave. I haven't stopped at any 2-4-hour diner since that night, not even when I'm starving and dead tired. Because I have this terrible feeling that wherever I go, no matter how many miles I put between me and that first diner, I will always be the last customer. And he'll be waiting in the corner booth, plate untouched, smiling that same empty smile, ready for the next time I walk through the door. This happened 4 years ago when I was 26. I had just moved to a small industrial town in Ohio for a temporary job. Money was tight, so when I saw a posting for night security at an old abandoned factory on the edge of town, I took it without thinking twice. The pay was decent. The hours were from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and they said the place had been empty for almost 15 years. Easy money, I thought. The factory was huge, 3 stories of brick and rusted metal, surrounded by a chain-link fence with overgrown weeds pushing through the cracks. On my first night, the supervisor gave me a quick tour. Flashlight beams cutting through dusty hallways, broken windows letting in cold air, and the constant low hum of the wind moving through the empty production floor. He handed me a set of keys, a flashlight, and a radio that barely worked, then left me alone. The first few hours were quiet. I walked the perimeter, my boots echoing on the concrete. The air smelled of rust, old oil, and damp concrete. Every now and then I'd hear a distant creak or the sound of something settling in the walls. Normal for an old building, I told myself. Around 2:30 a.m., I was doing my second round on the main floor. The place was pitch black except for my flashlight beam. I reached the far end where the old assembly line used to be. That's when I noticed the lights. One by one, the overhead fluorescent lights started flickering on in a perfect line down the center of the factory floor. Not all at once, sequentially, like someone was walking along and flipping switches I couldn't see. The hum grew louder. I stood frozen, watching the lights come on one section at a time until half the floor was lit with that sickly yellow glow. I radioed the supervisor. No answer. The radio just hissed static. I started walking back toward the entrance, trying to stay calm. That's when I heard the first sound of machinery. A low mechanical groan from the assembly line. Then another. Belts started moving. Gears turned. The entire line was coming back to life, even though there was no power running to it. I had checked the main breaker myself earlier. I picked up my pace. The lights above me flickered faster. Then I heard footsteps, heavy boots on the metal catwalk above me, moving in the same direction I was going. I shone my flashlight up there. Nothing. The footsteps stopped when I stopped, started again when I moved. By the time I reached the main entrance, I was almost running. The door was locked from the inside. I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking. The machinery noise grew louder behind me, conveyor belts running, metal clanging, like the factory was waking up and going back to work. Finally, the door opened. I stepped outside into the cold night air and slammed it shut behind me. The sounds from inside stopped instantly. The lights went dark one by one, reversing the order they had turned on. I sat in my car for the rest of the shift with the engine running and the doors locked. When the morning supervisor arrived at 6 a.m., I told him what happened. He just nodded slowly and said, "Yeah, that's why we have trouble keeping night guards." I quit the next day. But here's what still bothers me the most. 6 months later, I was driving through a completely different town in Pennsylvania, hundreds of miles away. I stopped at a gas station late at night. While I was filling up, an old man pumping gas at the next pump looked at me for a long moment and said, "You worked the night shift at the old factory, didn't you?" I froze. I had never told anyone outside that town about it. Before I could answer, he continued, "They're still running the line at night. They always need one more person to watch it. The last guy never made it to morning." He got in his car and drove away without another word. I haven't taken any night security jobs since then, and whenever I drive past an old abandoned factory or warehouse at night, I keep my eyes straight ahead and my foot on the gas. Because somewhere out there, those lights are still turning on one by one. This happened last winter when I was 30 years old. I had just lost my job in the city and was driving back to my hometown in upstate New York to stay with my parents for a while until I figured things out. It was a long, quiet drive through familiar back roads I hadn't taken in over 10 years. Snow was falling lightly, the kind that sticks to the trees and makes everything look soft and peaceful. Around 11 p.m., I passed the old neighborhood where I grew up. On impulse, I turned down Maple Street. The houses looked mostly the same, porch lights glowing, snow covering the roofs. Then I saw it, my childhood home, the one we moved out of when I was 12. The for sale sign was crooked in the front yard, half buried in snow. The windows were dark. It looked empty. Something made me pull over. I sat there for a minute with the engine running, heater blowing warm air on my face, staring at the house. Memories came flooding back, riding my bike in the driveway, my mom calling me in for dinner, the big oak tree in the backyard where I built a treehouse with my dad. I told myself I was just being nostalgic. But before I knew it, I had turned off the car and was walking up the snow-covered path to the front door. The real estate lockbox was on the doorknob. I don't know why, but I tried the code my parents used to use for everything my old birthday. It clicked open. I hesitated for a second, then took the key and let myself inside. The house smelled exactly the same. That mix of old wood, faint lemon cleaner, and something uniquely home. The heat was off, so it was cold, but the air felt thick with memories. I walked through the living room. The carpet was the same, worn beige. The stairs creaked in the exact same spots they always did. I went upstairs to my old bedroom. The walls were still painted blue. My old bed frame was gone, but the closet door had the same scratch marks from when I was little and tried to hide my pet lizard. I sat on the floor for a while, just breathing it in. It felt comforting, like the house remembered me too. Then I heard a small sound from downstairs, like a drawer closing gently. I froze. The house was supposed to be empty. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I told myself it was just the old pipes or the wind, but I grabbed a flashlight from my car and went back inside to check. I started on the ground floor. Everything looked normal. Then I went into the kitchen. The cabinets were open, not all of them, just the ones my mom used to keep the snacks in. A single box of my favorite childhood cereal was sitting on the counter, the kind they stopped making years ago. It looked brand new. My heart started beating faster. I hadn't touched anything. I backed out of the kitchen and went upstairs again. In my old bedroom, the closet door was now open. Inside, on the floor, was my old baseball glove, the one I lost when I was 10. It still had my name written inside in faded marker. That's when the footsteps started. Soft footsteps on the hardwood floor downstairs, moving slowly from the kitchen toward the stairs. They sounded like someone wearing socks, familiar, almost careful, like they didn't want to wake anyone. I stood at the top of the stairs, flashlight pointed down. The footsteps reached the bottom step and stopped. Then a voice, quiet, gentle, sounding exactly like my mother when I was a kid, called up the stairs. "Sweetheart, did you finish your homework?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The voice called again, a little closer. "Dinner's almost ready. Come down before it gets cold." I backed away from the stairs slowly. The footsteps started coming up. One creak, two creaks, the exact same pattern I remembered from when I was little and tried to sneak downstairs at night. I ran to the front door, fumbled with the lock, and burst outside into the cold snow. I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove straight to my parents' new house without stopping. When I told my mom what happened, she went very quiet. Then she said something I'll never forget. "We sold that house because strange things started happening after you left for college. Lights turning on by themselves, drawers opening. Sometimes I'd hear you calling me from your old room, even though you were hundreds of miles away." She paused, then added softly, "We never told you because we didn't want to scare you, but the real estate agent said the new owners only lasted 3 months before they left too. I haven't been back to that street since. I drive the long way around town now whenever I visit my parents. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. Last month, my mom sent me a photo. She had driven past the old house out of curiosity. The for sale sign was gone. Lights were on inside. Someone had moved in again. In the upstairs window, my old bedroom window, a small silhouette was standing there, looking out at the street. It looked like a child. It looked like me when I was 10 years old. And it raised one hand and waved. I still don't know what lives in that house, but I think it's been waiting for me to come home again. And the worst part is, sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed, I hear the faintest sound of footsteps on the stairs in my apartment, coming up slowly, calling my name the way my mother used to. I haven't answered yet, but I wonder how long I can keep ignoring it.